The story of the tides begins not with water, but with light. Imagine the moon, pale and steady, hanging in the sky above a darkened earth. Its glow is soft, almost fragile, yet its influence reaches deep, stirring entire oceans. The moon does not shine with its own fire, but with borrowed sunlight. And yet, in the quietest way, it has become the sculptor of Earth's shores, the keeper of a rhythm that has pulsed for billions of years. Close your eyes, if you wish, and picture the seas as they were long ago, vast and restless, stretching endlessly, their surfaces shimmering with silver threads of moonlight. Even then, the moon pulled gently, drawing water toward it, lifting the oceans into great swells that rose and fell like a giant breathing. The earth itself seemed to inhale and exhale under that eternal pull. This is the heartbeat of the tides, the ancient breath of our planet. The science, though simple in words, is profound in meaning. Gravity, the invisible tether, binds the earth and the moon together. As the moon circles us, its pull stretches the oceans, creating bulges of water on opposite sides of the earth. One faces the moon directly, drawn outward in longing. The other faces away, as though the earth itself were leaning back. And so the waters rise and fall, twice each day, in an endless cycle as old as time. But tides are not the moon's doing alone. The sun, burning far brighter, also lends its hand. At times, when sun and moon align, their forces unite, pulling the seas into mighty spring tides. At other times, when they stand at right angles, their pulls soften each other, and the waters rest in gentler neap tides. Together, moon and sun weave a celestial dance, a choreography written in gravity and light, painting rhythms onto Earth's oceans with every passing day to early humans, long before the language of science was born. This dance was a mystery written in water. They watched the sea advance and retreat along the shore. They learned the rhythms by heart, for survival and for wonder. Fishermen timed their harvests with the waxing and waning tides. Travelers and sailors felt the pull beneath their vessels. Poets and dreamers looked upward at the moon and saw not only beauty but power, an unseen hand stirring the very seas. Think of the tides as Earth's lullaby. With each rise, the waters reach upward, stretching toward the heavens. With each fall, they retreat, settling into stillness once more. This gentle back and forth is more than motion. It is music, a song that has played for as long as Earth has known oceans. And beneath this song lies a secret. The tides are not merely water moving, they are life moving. In every ripple lies the story of how the moon's quiet tug would one day guide the path of living things. For now, let us linger. In this image, the earth cradled in space, its oceans shimmering under the light of a watchful moon. The world inhales, the world exhales. The tides rise, the tides fall. The eternal pull continues, steady and unbroken, a reminder that even the softest of forces can shape the grandest of worlds. And so begins our journey, following the moonlight and the ocean's breath into the long story of how tides, gentle yet relentless, shaped the life that would one day awaken on these shores. The moon may be the closest partner in this dance, but it does not dance alone. Far beyond it, burning with endless fire, the sun also joins in the pulling, and together they shape the ever-changing patterns of Earth's tides. If the moon is a soft hand guiding the oceans, then the sun is a steady drumbeat, stronger by sheer size, yet softened by distance. Their duet has played since the seas first formed, weaving a rhythm both simple and intricate, like two musicians improvising across an eternal stage. Picture it now. The Earth spinning slowly in space, a globe of water and land bathed in sunlight, with the moon circling quietly around. Every day, gravity ties these three together: Earth, moon, and sun, each pulling on the oceans, each shaping the rise and fall of waves. Sometimes their forces align, and the sea answers with great surges, high tides that flood further onto the shore. These are called spring tides, not for the season, but for the way the water springs higher, lifted by the combined pull of sun and moon. Other times, their pulls cross each other, working not in harmony, but in gentle opposition. The waters, caught between two calls, rise less dramatically. These are the neap tides, when the sea breathes more quietly, as though resting between deep inhalations. This interplay creates a living rhythm that repeats over and over, predictable, yet endlessly beautiful, an ocean's heartbeat, woven from celestial geometry. It is a rhythm written in cycles of days and weeks. Twice each day the tides rise and fall, pulled by the moon's passage overhead and beneath our feet. Every 2 weeks, spring tides swell with energy when the sun and moon stand together in new or full moon. Then neap tides soften the worlds edges when they meet at right angles during first and third quarter. The ocean is not random. It is poetry written in time, marked by the silent clockwork of the heavens. Long before clocks and calendars, people felt this rhythm in their bones. Along ancient shores, communities measured their lives not in hours, but in tides. They saw how the sea crept higher under a full moon, how it drew back in gentler arcs when the half moon hung overhead. Tides told them when to set nets, when to harvest shellfish, when to travel or wait. The sky was a book, and the water was its page. But the moon and sun write their story not only in height, but in timing. The tide does not simply mirror the moon's rise. It lags behind, delayed by the friction of water against continents, by the way Earth spins faster than the moon moves. This creates subtle shifts, unique to every shore. In some places, the sea surges with drama, in others, it creeps with gentleness. It is a reminder that while the dance is cosmic, the performance is local. Each coastline has its own rhythm, its own music, its own tide song. Science tells us that this interplay of moon and sun is one of Earth's most ancient stabilizers. The tides stir the seas, mixing nutrients, driving currents, shaping coastlines, balancing climates. Without their ceaseless rhythm, oceans would stagnate, and the delicate dance of life that followed might never have begun. And yet, beyond the science. There is poetry in the way this rhythm continues, unbroken, unhurried. Each tide is like a breath, an inhalation and exhalation, as though the earth itself is alive and listening to its two companions in the sky. The moon's whisper, the sun's warmth, earth's turning body, all entwined, all giving the oceans their pulse at ASU. Imagine this dance. Let yourself picture standing by a shore at twilight. The horizon glows with the last touch of the sun, while the moon quietly rises, pale and serene. The tide creeps forward, one gentle wave after another, as though bowing first to the sun, then to the moon. It is an ancient ritual older than humankind, a reminder that the cosmos itself is never still, and as the water folds back into the sea, you feel it, that eternal pattern, the weaving of forces both near and far, simple yet infinite. The tides continue their song, a duet of gravity and light, guiding us now into deeper reflections, into the memory of how these gentle movements once shaped the very first living worlds. The tide is older than life itself. Before there were forests swaying in the wind, before creatures swam through reefs of coral or birds traced arcs across the skies, there were only seas, vast, restless, silver beneath the moon. And even then, the tides rolled in and out, carving patterns along the shorelines of a young earth. These ancient waters were not empty. They were waiting, holding within them the ingredients of something wondrous, the first breath of life. Close your eyes, if you wish, and imagine the earth nearly 4 billion years ago. The continents we know today had not yet taken shape. Instead, the surface was a quilt of volcanic islands and shallow seas. The air was heavy with gases, rich with carbon dioxide, tinged with methane, veiled in mist. Lightning cracked across the horizon. Rain fell, hot and unending, feeding oceans that steamed and churned. It was a world in turmoil, but also a world in becoming, and along its margins, those places where sea met land, the tides moved like patient sculptors. Twice each day, the waters rose, flooding low rocky basins, tidal pools, and sandy flats. Twice each day, they fell back, leaving behind puddles warmed by the sun, shallow pockets where minerals and molecules gathered. These pools were the world's first laboratories, mixing bowls of chemistry, cradles of potential for life. Beginnings are fragile. Scientists believe that the constant ebb and flow of tides created the perfect rhythm for these beginnings. When the tide rolled in, waters carried nutrients and dissolved minerals into small pools. When the tide rolled out, the sun's warmth concentrated them, drawing them into films and crystals, forcing molecules to bond and break, to recombine, to experiment. Over countless cycles, simple chemistry grew more complex, until something stirred, self-assembling molecules, tiny chains that could carry information, the precursors of life itself. The tides, in their rising and falling, were not simply movements of water. They were the breath that stirred life awake. Without them, the sea might have remained too vast, too diluted, for such delicate experiments to take hold. but along the shifting edges of land and water, in the rhythm of wet and dry, the first sparks could kindle. The tides created boundaries, and in those boundaries, possibilities. Think of it as music. The ocean was the orchestra, vast and booming, while the tides were the quiet metronome, keeping time. Every flood brought new notes. Every retreat allowed them to linger, to harmonize. It was not chaos, but cadence. And out of this slow, patient rhythm emerged order. Tiny structures that could copy themselves, protect themselves, and, in time, evolve. The image is almost dreamlike. Shallow pools glowing under the moon, waters swirling with minerals, bubbles, rising as chemical reactions sparked. With each tide, the pools shifted, dried, and refilled, repeating the experiment over and over. The earth had endless time, and the tides had endless patience. Out of that patience, life emerged, fragile, invisible, but unstoppable. This story, though ancient, is not only told by imagination. It is whispered in evidence. In certain rocks, we find layered patterns left behind by ancient tidal cycles, sediments, deposited as the water moved in and out, regular as a heartbeat. In these rocks, we also find the oldest hints of life, microfossils, chemical signatures, tiny remains of organisms that lived billions of years ago. It is as though the earth kept a journal, writing in stone the memory of tides and the life they nurtured. Over time, life spread beyond those shallow pools. It drifted into the open ocean, multiplying, diversifying, transforming the planet itself. But its first cradle, the place where molecules first danced into something more, may always have been the tidal shore, where sea and land touched, where moon and sun together wrote the rhythm of creation. Think of this is to feel awe. The tides we watch today, the gentle rise and fall of water on beaches and harbors, are the same tides that once whispered life into being. Each wave that folds upon the shore carries with it the memory of those first beginnings. It is as if the ocean, in breathing with the moon, gave Earth its first heartbeat. Imagine now standing by a modern tidal pool. Clear water rests in hollowed rock. Tiny crabs scuttle. Sea anemones wave their delicate arms. Small fish dart between shadows. The air is calm, the sunlight soft. But look deeper, and you see something ancient. These tidal pools are living echoes of the world's first laboratories, reminders of how the ceaseless rise and fall of the sea once transformed simple matter into life itself. And in this reflection lies something both humbling and comforting. Life did not begin with a sudden blaze, but with a rhythm, slow, gentle, unhurried. It began not in silence, but in the music of the tides. When you listen to the ocean's breath, when you hear the hush of waves folding into sand, you are hearing not only the present, but the past. You are listening to the lullaby that first awakened life. And as the tide retreats, leaving pools shimmering in the moon's glow, it invites you too into that ancient stillness, that memory of a world just beginning, where possibilities stirred with every rise and fall of the sea. The tide never ceased its rhythm. Long after it stirred the first fragile whispers of life, it continued to rise and fall, shaping the stage where those whispers became voices, and those voices became songs. Life, once no more than a flicker, in shallow pools, began to move, to change, to test the boundaries of water and land. And always, the tides were there, guiding, challenging, inviting life to evolve. Imagine again the earth of billions of years ago, long before forests shaded. The land, long before creatures left footprints in the sand. The oceans were alive now, crowded with tiny, single-celled beings drifting like dust motes in the water. They fed on sunlight, on minerals, on each other. The seas were still wild, stirred by storms, warmed by the sun, pulled endlessly by the moon. The tides continued their ancient breath, and with every breath, life grew more complex, the edges of the sea, where tides washed over rocks and retreated. New experiments were underway. Microbes clung to stones, forming colonies, slimy, mats that glistened in the sun. With each tide, they were submerged, then exposed, learning resilience in both states. Some developed ways to capture energy more efficiently. Others found protection in the tiny films of water left behind. Slowly, step by step, life learned to endure change. It was the tide's gift, the lesson that survival depends on adaptation. Over time, simple cells joined together, forming more complex organisms. They learned to cooperate, to specialize, to build structures within themselves. In the quiet rhythm of tides, evolution was being rehearsed, like a play with each act longer and more intricate. In tidal flats and shallow lagoons, creatures learned to crawl, to burrow, to seek shelter from the waves. Every rise and fall of the sea tested them. Every retreat left them vulnerable. And with each challenge, life answered by growing stronger. Picture a tidal at dusk 3 billion years ago. The air is still heavy with gases unfamiliar to us. The water glows faintly green with microscopic algae, soaking up the last of the sunlight. Tiny, worm-like creatures squirm through the sand. Simple jelly-like forms pulse gently, carried by the water. The tide creeps in, covering them, cradling them. Hours later it retreats, leaving them bare, exposed to the air. Some shrivel and die. Others, by chance or by change, endure. Evolution is not a race, but a tide itself, slow, persistent, unrelenting. About 600 million years ago, the stage grew more crowded. In the shallow seas of ancient Earth, life flourished in forms strange and wondrous. The Ediacaran creatures, flat, frond-like, quilted in patterns like leaves pressed into sand, spread across tidal zones. They had no eyes, no bones, no mouths, yet they covered the seafloor in quiet abundance. The tides swept nutrients to them, washed waste away, and carried their young to new places. The rise and fall of the sea was the invisible hand that sustained them. Then came a great blossoming, the Cambrian explosion, over 500 million years ago. In what seemed like an instant in Earth's long history, the oceans filled with creatures of endless variety. trilobites scuttling over rocks, spiny worms twisting in the mud, predators with jaws and eyes that hunted in the shallows. Once again, the tides were their teacher. Shifting waters demanded agility, resilience, creativity. Life met the challenge with innovation, hard shells, grasping claws, new ways of moving and sensing. The tide had done more than stir life awake. It had become a cradle of evolution. By forcing organisms to face both the security of the sea and the uncertainty of land, it shaped bodies and behaviors. Some creatures learned to breathe air for a time, surviving when the water left them stranded. Others learned to burrow deep, waiting for the tide to return. Some crept into damp sand, testing the boundary between worlds. These small experiments would one day lead to one of the greatest journeys in history. The movement of life from water to land at it is humbling to imagine that the simple rhythm of the tide, born from the moon's steady pull, could have guided such a vast unfolding. Yet it makes sense. The tide is not chaos, but structure, predictable, relentless, a pattern that never breaks. In that pattern, life found opportunity. Like a child learning to walk by holding to a steady rhythm, evolution learned to dance to the music of the sea. And even now, we can see its legacy. Tidal pools today are miniature worlds, echoing the ancient theaters of change. Within them, starfish creep slowly across rocks. Barnacles cling with stubborn strength. Small fish dart into hiding places, while crabs scuttle sideways, ever alert. Each is a survivor of countless generations shaped by the rise and fall of water. To look into a tidal pool is to peer into deep time, to see the memory of how the tides once challenged life to become what it is. There is poetry in this. That's something. As gentle as the pull of the moon, something as quiet as the rhythm of water could sculpt the fierce diversity of life. Evolution is often thought of as struggle, as survival against odds, but it is also patience, persistence, and rhythm. It is the tide, repeating endlessly, inviting life to grow stronger with each return as the tide retreats once more in our story. Let us linger on this thought. The oceans are not simply water, and the tides are not simply movement. Together, they are the world's first teacher, the first cradle, the first guide. And in the breathing of the sea, the rise and fall of every wave, the story of evolution continues, unbroken, timeless, eternal. By the time humans arrived, the tides were already ancient. They had stirred life awake in shallow pools, guided creatures through the cradle of evolution, and carved coastlines over millions of years. And when humankind at last stood upon the shores, gazing at the sea with wonder and curiosity, the tides were waiting, steady and eternal. For early people, the tide was both mystery and companion. Long before there were clocks, before the mapping of stars was written in science, there was the sea, advancing and retreating with a rhythm that could be counted on. The tide's breath told fishers when to cast their nets, told gatherers when to search for shellfish in the sand, told travelers when to launch their boats. To live by the sea was to learn the language of the tide. Imagine the earliest humans standing at a shoreline, perhaps 100,000 years ago. They watched the water creep forward, folding wave upon wave, until rocks disappeared beneath the foam. Hours later, they saw it retreat, leaving behind treasures, gleaming shells, stranded fish, driftwood worn smooth. This was a world of gifts, and the rhythm of tides became part of their memory, woven into the stories they told by firelight. Later, when villages and cities rose, tides continued to shape human lives. Along river mouths and estuaries, where salt water and fresh water meet, fertile land was created by the mingling of tides. Great civilizations grew in such places. The Mesopotamians between their rivers, the Egyptians along the Nile, though its flood was seasonal rather than tidal. Still, in every culture near the sea, tides were noted, recorded, sometimes worshipped. They were not merely water moving. They were powers beyond human control, sacred, mysterious, divine. The ancient Greeks watched the tides with careful eyes. They noticed their connection to the phases of the moon, though the mechanism remained elusive. Philosophers speculated. Some believed the tides were the breathing of the earth itself. Others thought they were drawn by winds or by unseen currents. It would take many centuries before the truth that tides are the pull of moon and sun was understood. Yet, even without the explanation, the pattern was clear. The sea had a clock, and humankind learned to read it. For the people of the Pacific Islands, tides were essential navigational tools. Master sailors learned to sense the pull of water, the timing of currents, the whispers of waves against their canoes. They read the sea as one might read a map, understanding that the ocean was not chaos but order, not empty but alive with rhythm. In Northern Europe, where the tide swings dramatically along shallow coasts, entire communities built their lives around its rise and fall, constructing harbors, fish traps, and salt ponds that depended on tidal timing. Consider the medieval fishermen of England, waiting by the shore for the tide to flood estuaries and bring shoals of herring closer to land. Or the people of France's Mont Saint-Michel, where tides race across sands with astonishing speed, transforming the landscape twice each day. These communities lived not only beside the tide, but with it, in partnership, in reliance, in awe. The tides also shaped trade, war, and exploration. Ancient ports depended on high tide to allow ships to enter safely. Armies learned to use tides to their advantage, crossing shallows when the waters pulled away, or trapping enemies when the waters rushed back. Even the stories of conquests and voyages are written in tidal ink. When Julius Caesar planned his invasion of Britain, he carefully chose the phase of the moon to ensure the tides would favor his fleet. When explorers set sail across oceans, they trusted not only wind and star, but also the rhythm of the tide beneath them. And yet, beyond the practical, tides touched something deeper in the human spirit. They inspired myths and legends, poetry, and prayer. In India, coastal temples were built where tides would rise and cover their steps, as if the gods themselves breathed through the sea. In Japan, poets wrote of the moon's reflection shimmering on tidal flats, of love and longing tied to the pull of water. Across the world, the tide was more than science. It was story, mystery, and metaphor. Slowly, as human knowledge grew, science unveiled the tide's secret. In the 17th century, the great Isaac Newton revealed that tides are caused by gravity, the pull of the moon and the sun. It was a revelation that joined the heavens and the earth in one invisible thread, the same force that held the planets. In orbit was the force that guided the fisherman's net, the sailor's voyage, the poet's inspiration. It was as though the universe itself reached down and touched the shore. Even with this knowledge, the poetry of the tides did not fade. To the contrary, it deepened. Knowing that every wave is pulled by the moon above makes the connection even more intimate, more wondrous. Humanity learned that we are not separate from the cosmos, but woven into its fabric, caught in the same rhythm that moves oceans and stars alike. Think now of a quiet harbor centuries ago. Lanterns flicker along the docks. Wooden ships creak softly as the tide rises, lifting them from the mud. Fishermen ready their boats, knowing that the water will soon be deep enough to carry them out. The moon hangs above, pale and constant, unseen perhaps through clouds, but always there, always pulling. This scene could belong to any century, any shore, any people. It is timeless, and as you let this image settle, you realize something simple yet profound. The tide has always been our teacher, our companion, our guide. It has fed us, protected us, inspired us, and led us across oceans. It has written itself into our calendars, our myths, our prayers, our poems. The tide is part of the human story, just as much as it is part of Earth's story. And so we drift onward, from human shores to the wider world again, into the present moment where tides still breathe, shaping coasts, guiding creatures, whispering reminders of our place within a larger rhythm. The tide does not rest. Even now, as it has for billions of years, it rises and falls, breathing through the arteries of Earth's oceans. We, who live in the brief span of human history, sometimes forget its vast patience. To us, the sea may seem unchanging, eternal, but the tides are not fixed. They are living rhythms, shifting with time, shaping coasts, nurturing life, and now, responding to the world we have made, stand, if only in imagination, at the edge of a modern shore. The air is filled with the cry of gulls, the salt of spray, the distant rumble of waves. The tide approaches, rolling forward in ripples that glitter under sunlight. It will continue its journey, up across the sand, perhaps into harbors and estuaries, into salt marshes where reeds sway in the wind. Hours later it will retreat, uncovering mudflats where wading birds hunt and crabs scuttle sideways. This is not random motion. It is a daily symphony, rehearsed endlessly, always familiar, always new. Every coastal ecosystem on Earth is bound to this rhythm. Mangroves grow where tides flood and withdraw, their roots reaching into salt water, creating nurseries for fish and shelter for birds. Coral reefs, brilliant with life, are bathed in tidal currents that deliver nutrients and wash away waste. Estuaries, Those quiet places where rivers meet the sea are stirred by tides that mix fresh water with salt, creating fertile ground for countless creatures. Without the pulse of the tide, these places would fade, stagnant and lifeless. With it, they thrive, alive with color, movement, and song. For humans, too, the tide remains essential. Harbors still depend on its timing. Fishermen still watch its rise and fall. Even modern science, with satellites circling above, relies on the tide's rhythm to understand climate, currents, and the turning of the earth. In subtle ways, it connects everything, from the smallest shellfish waiting for the tide to return to the satellites measuring the oceans from space. Yet the tide's eternal rhythm is now met with new challenges. The seas themselves are rising, warmed and swollen by a changing climate. In places where tides once offered predictability, they now bring floods that creep higher than memory recalls. Villages that lived for centuries in harmony with the sea are beginning to retreat. Harbors need new walls. Salt water reaches into farmlands, into rivers, into wells. The tide is the same, yet the stage it plays upon is changing, and still the tide adapts. It has always done so. Coastlines shift, beaches erode, deltas grow and vanish. The tide sculpts earth in slow motion, carving cliffs, shaping islands, rearranging the world grain by grain. To watch the tide is to watch time itself at work. We may measure our lives in years, but the tide measures in centuries. It remembers ice ages and warm ages, continents colliding and drifting apart. What seems new to us is ancient to the sea. This rhythm is also written in the moon's slow retreat. Each year, the moon drifts a little farther away from Earth, just a few centimeters, but enough to change the tides across deep time. As it retreats, the tides will weaken, their pull less dramatic, their reach less profound. Billions of years from now, they may fade altogether. But for now, for the span of our lives, they remain steady, patient, and strong. An eternal partner, shaping the coasts we walk upon, the seas we sail, the dreams we carry. There is something comforting in this thought. Even in a world of change, the tide continues. It has seen the rise and fall of glaciers, the shifting of climates, the coming and going of countless species. It has witnessed extinction and renewal, silence and song. Through it all, the tide has never failed to rise again. It is Earth's heartbeat, steady and unbroken. And when you listen, truly listen, you can hear it, not only in the rush of water at the shore, but in the hush of rivers meeting the sea, in the cries of birds that follow its retreat, in the silence of mudflats waiting for its return. The tide is everywhere, in sound and stillness, in motion and pause. It is the breath of the world, reminding us that all things move in cycles, that change itself can be steady, that the universe, in its vastness, has a rhythm we can trust. So, let us linger here at the threshold of land and sea and reflect. The tide that rolls in today is the same that once stirred life in ancient pools, the same that guided sailors by moonlight, the same that continues to shape coasts and feed creatures. It is eternal, and yet ever-changing. It belongs to the past, the present, and the future all at once. And as the tide withdraws once more into the horizon, we see not an ending, but a promise. It will return, as it always has, as it always will. The moon has always been our closest companion in the night sky, glowing softly above the oceans it pulls and the tides it shapes. But though it feels eternal, this relationship is not fixed. Like two dancers circling one another, the earth and moon are bound in a gravitational embrace. Yet, this embrace is not perfectly still. With every rise and fall of the tides, there is a transfer of energy, an exchange so subtle we cannot feel it in a single lifetime, but so steady that, across eons, it alters the balance of the whole system. Each day, as the ocean swells and recedes under the moon's pull, friction between the moving water and the Earth's spinning crust creates a gentle drag. That drag slows Earth's rotation ever so slightly. Our planet's days, once just a handful of hours long in the deep past, have stretched into the 24 we now know. And in return for this slowing, energy is passed into the moon, nudging it outward, ever so slightly farther from Earth. The moon, on average, drifts away by nearly 4 centimeters each year. For centimeters, a distance no greater than the width of a small seashell. Yet in the patience of cosmic time, that small measure adds up to something profound. Imagine millions of years stretched out like a long shoreline. The moon, once hovering much closer, now stands at a greater remove. Its pull on our oceans weakens with each passing age. The tides, once mighty, become more subdued. The rise and fall that once sculpted the edges of continents, nurtured tide, pools, and directed the flow of rivers, begins to lose some of its power. The heartbeat of Earth's waters slows. Its rhythm softens that we can trace this story backward as well. Long ago, the moon loomed much larger in our sky. Its proximity meant that tides were immense, surging far higher and retreating farther than those we see today. Early life encountered a shoreline of restless waters, where shallow pools were constantly mixed, replenished, and stirred by powerful waves. Perhaps it was within these restless shallows that the conditions for life's beginnings were most fertile. The moon's closeness was like the guiding hand of a parent, shaping the environment for life's earliest steps. But the moon is no longer that close guardian. It is slowly slipping away into a quieter partnership. Today, the Earth still spins. The tides still rise and fall, but the tug grows just a little weaker with each passing year. This is a story we can measure with lasers bounced off mirrors left on the lunar surface by astronauts. We know the moon is leaving us, retreating at a pace that is steady and unstoppable. Stretch this drift forward into the distant future, and the days of Earth grow longer still. The length of a day increases, slowly but inexorably, as though the Earth itself is relaxing, loosening its spin, unhurried. The moon, farther and farther away, exerts less pull. The tides grow gentler, less dramatic. Someday, so far ahead that it exists more in imagination than in prediction, Earth and Moon will reach a balance where Earth shows the same face to the Moon, just as the Moon already shows only one face to us. A timeless stillness will settle into their dance. What will life be like then? Perhaps humanity, or its descendants, will look up into the night sky and see a moon that looks slightly smaller, a little dimmer, its hold on the seas less commanding. Coastal life will have adapted to quieter tides, gentler rhythms. The roaring crash of waves we know today may become a softer, slower pulse. The drama of the oceans, which has always mirrored the drama of the heavens, will mellow with time. And yet, there is something deeply peaceful in this vision. A slowing earth, a drifting moon, tides that soften like an old song sung more gently with age. Our world has always been changing, and the relationship between Earth and Moon is just another verse in the planet's endless story. It reminds us that even the things we think of as constants, the moon's glow, the rise of the sea, are not eternal. They, too, evolve like everything else under the gaze of time. For us, here and now, the tides remain strong. They wash against our shores, shape our days, guide our calendars, and nurture life. But far ahead, in ages we cannot see, they will slow into something different, something calmer. The moon will continue its outward journey, and Earth will continue its long, graceful turning. Together, they will remain bound, but in a softer, more distant embrace as we rest under tonight's sky. We can imagine this quiet drift, not with fear, but with wonder. The same moon we see now has been growing more distant every moment since the first creatures crawled from the tide pools. And long after we are gone, it will still be moving outward, carrying with it the memory of every tide it once called. Like a lullaby that fades as the singer drifts into sleep, the tides will soften, and Earth will continue turning, rocking gently into the future. Imagine, for a moment, a world without tides. No twice-daily rise and fall. No gentle pull of the moon drawing the waters forward and back. Picture the oceans still and unmoving, vast mirrors of glass reflecting only the sky above. The beaches would lie quiet, their sands dry and unshaped, untouched by the endless fingers of the sea. The sound of waves would still exist. Winds would stir the surface, storms would rage, but the deep, rhythmic pulse of tidal motion would be absent. Without tides, Earth would be a world missing its heartbeat. For the tides are not just a movement of water, they are the planet's slow, patient breath, a steady inhalation and exhalation that has been ongoing since the moon's birth. Take that away, and you strip the oceans of one of their oldest rhythms, a rhythm that shaped not only coastlines, but the very story of life itself. We know from earlier chapters how crucial tides were in stirring the first shallow pools, in cycling nutrients, in coaxing life from the sea to the land. In a tideless Earth, perhaps those fragile beginnings would never have taken hold. Life might still have begun, but its tempo would have been different, less nudged, less prodded, less invited to take daring steps forward. The evolutionary journey might have remained tucked away in the deep oceans, never exploring tidal flats, never venturing into strange new realms. The coastlines themselves would be unrecognizable. Without the tides, no wide mudflats would stretch outward at low water. No tidal estuaries would breathe in and out. No salt marshes would form as the sea painted back and forth across the land. The fertile cradles that now host rich biodiversity, the oysters, the crabs, the shorebirds, might not exist at all. The coastline would be a sharper boundary, a single line between land and sea, without the daily blur that tides create. For human beings, too, the absence would be profound. Tides shaped how we traveled, how we fished, how we understood the heavens. Without them, early coastal peoples might not have noticed the subtle connections between sky and sea, between the moon overhead and the ocean's restlessness below. The great leap of noticing celestial cycles, a foundation of both science and spirituality, might have been delayed or lost entirely. A tideless Earth would have been quieter, but also perhaps dimmer in understanding. The energy of the tides also does more than move water. It stirs the oceans themselves. Like a great spoon, tidal motion mixes warm and cold, nutrient-rich and nutrient-poor layers. Without tides, the seas might be more stagnant, the great conveyor belts of the deep. Ocean less vigorous. Fisheries, plankton blooms, even the oxygen that circulates through the marine world. These too are gently guided by tidal forces. In their absence, life would be more fragile, ecosystems less resilient, the ocean less alive. And yet, imagine the serenity. Beaches where the line between water and sand is constant, unwavering, unbroken. Ports where ships float undisturbed, never rising or falling, never caught by the turning of the tide. Islands where the sea is a permanent embrace, neither retreating nor advancing. To walk such shores might feel strangely eternal, like stepping into a world frozen in time. But perhaps, too, that stillness would feel haunting, for it is motion that brings life. It is rhythm that creates beauty. Just as the beating of the heart sustains the body, so too does the rise and fall of the tides sustain the earth's story. A motionless ocean would be a world missing its music, a silence where there should be song. The moon itself would feel different, too. We often look up at it and feel, in some deep way, its connection to the sea. Its phases mirror the cycles of the tide, its presence written into the shoreline. Without tides, the moon would become merely a lamp in the sky, beautiful but unlinked, aloof. It would still shine, still wax and wane, but we would not sense its pull in the water at our feet. One of the most ancient connections between earth and sky would be broken. In this still earth, humanity might never have spoken of tides as metaphors for time, for love, for longing. Poets would not speak of the tide's return, nor lovers meet. At the changing water's edge, the language of rhythm, ebb and flow, would be thinner. A world without tides would not only be poorer in life, but poorer in story. And yet, even imagining such a place brings us a new appreciation for what we have. The real earth is not silent, not motionless. It is alive with rhythm. It sees swelling and receding like an eternal song. By picturing the absence, we come to cherish the presence. Oh, let us return to the real shoreline. Listen again to the tide whispering at your feet, retreating only to return. Watch as the water shapes the sand, builds the marsh, nourishes thee. Creatures that scuttle and swim. Feel the breath of the ocean as it rises beneath the moon's gentle hand. This is Earth as it is meant to be, never still, always moving, always alive. And as you drift now, as your breathing softens, imagine that you too are part of this rhythm. Inhale as the tide comes in. Exhale as it recedes. Let the steady pull of the moon carry you into rest, rocking you on its timeless waves. For in the end, we are all children of the tide, carried forward by its quiet strength, lulled by its endless music, bound forever to its eternal motion. Beyond the shores of our blue planet, where waves rise and fall to the whispers of the moon, the idea of tides stretches outward into the vastness of the cosmos. For tides are not only the story of ocean waters, they are the story of gravity itself, the universal pull and sway that shapes worlds, moons, and even galaxies. Here, we drift far beyond Earth, floating through a universe where the dance of tides plays out in many forms, each one a quiet rhythm sculpting the fabric of space and time. Imagine standing on a distant moon, far from Earth, circling a giant planet like Jupiter. Above you looms a colossal sphere of clouds and storms, so immense it fills half the sky. The pull of its gravity is relentless, tugging at your small world with invisible hands. That pull is a tide, not of water, for perhaps your world is icy and dry, but a tide of rock and ice itself. This is the story of Jupiter's moon Io, a world of fire and fury. Its surface is covered in restless volcanoes, spewing fountains of molten rock high into the thin atmosphere. Why such violence? The answer is tides. Jupiter's enormous gravity, along with the pull of neighboring moons, stretches and squeezes Io over and over, like a ball of clay in invisible fingers. The friction of that ceaseless kneading warms its insides until rock itself becomes liquid. Here, tides give rise not to gentle waves, but to a world alive with flame. A little farther away orbits Europa, cloaked in ice. Beneath its frozen crust, tides stir a hidden ocean, vast, deep, and perhaps teeming with possibilities. As Jupiter's gravity flexes Europa's body, heat seeps into the darkness below, keeping water liquid where otherwise it would be frozen solid. In this secret sea, far from the warmth of the sun, some imagine life could take hold, nurtured by tides just as it was on Earth so long ago. In this way, tides are not merely our story, but perhaps a universal invitation to life. Move further still, and you reach Saturn, encircled by rings that shimmer like jewels. Among its many moons lies Enceladus, a small world gleaming with ice. From cracks in its southern pole, geysers erupt, towering plumes of water shooting into space. They are born of tides, too. Saturn's pull flexes Enceladus, stirring its depths, driving currents, and powering fountains that spray into the void. Those plumes seed Saturn's rings, as if the moon itself were scattering luminous threads into the planet's embrace. Once again, we see that tides are not only the rise and fall of seas, but a force that binds and reshapes entire systems. Beyond our solar system, tides take on stranger, vaster forms. Astronomers speak of tidal locking, a phenomenon where one face of a world forever stares at its parent star, while the other remains in endless night. Our own moon is tidally locked to Earth, always showing us one side. But elsewhere, many exoplanets orbit so close to their stars that they too are locked, living in a twilight of extremes, one half scorched, the other frozen. Here, tides dictate not only the rhythm of oceans but the balance of climates, deciding whether life might cling to the thin strip between light and dark in a perpetual dawn. And even greater tides exist, cosmic tides of unimaginable scale. Picture a star straying too near to a black hole. As it approaches, the immense gravity stretches it thin, pulling it into ribbons of glowing gas. Astronomers call this a tidal disruption event, a moment where gravity's tide is so intense it unravels a star, feeding it to the darkness. In these rare, dramatic acts, tides remind us of their ultimate power. The same gentle rhythm that moves our seas can also tear apart suns. Even galaxies feel tides. When two galaxies pass close, their stars and clouds are pulled into great arcs and bridges, weaving luminous patterns across the void. These galactic tides reshape entire cities of stars, stirring cosmic nurseries where new suns are born. In this way, the universe itself seems to breathe with the rhythm of tides, endlessly reshaping, endlessly renewing. And so, as we drift in, thought from our own earthly shores into the great ocean of the universe, we see that tides are not small, local things. They are threads woven into the fabric of existence. From molten moons to frozen seas, from exoplanets in twilight to galaxies colliding in slow-motion ballet, tides whisper their influence across time and space. What began as the gentle pull of our moon on Earth's oceans is but a single note in a cosmic symphony. The tide is the language of gravity itself, spoken softly across the stars. And just as the sea ebbs and flows, so too does the universe rise and fall in its quiet, eternal dance. The sea has been with us since the very first dawn, a presence so constant that we sometimes forget to notice it. Yet if you pause, in the quiet of night, you can still hear it breathing. The waves arrive like soft whispers against the sand, retreating again as though the earth itself is sighing. This is not only water moving, it is a song older than memory, older than life itself. It is the lullaby of the tides. For billions of years, the ocean has sung this same refrain. The moon pulls, the earth responds, and the waters rise and fall in answer. It is a music that no ear can truly capture, for it does not belong to sound alone. It belongs to the rhythm of the world itself, to the subtle pulse that guides everything from the tiniest plankton drifting near the surface to the grand migrations of whales across the vast blue distances. Perhaps you have stood once by the shoreline, at twilight, when the sun has gone and the stars are waiting to appear. In that moment, as the tide moves at your feet, you feel something beyond words, a connection to the long story of the earth. Every ripple at your ankles, every hiss of foam upon the shore, is a reminder of ancient beginnings, of fragile creatures taking their first breath in tidal pools, of humans shaping their lives and cultures by the gifts of the sea. And still, tonight, it continues. The tide does not grow weary. The moon has not forgotten its watch. The sun, too, lends its subtle hand, weaving together the eternal push and pull. This balance has held for longer than mountains have stood, longer than forests have grown, longer even than the continents have drifted across the globe. To listen to the tide is to listen to a story without end. There is comfort in knowing this. While the world around us changes in ways large and small, the tide continues, faithful and steady. It is a promise written into the dance of the earth. And the moon, a pattern that has carried us from the dawn of life to the present. Each wave that curls and breaks along the shore is part of that promise, part of that unbroken song. As you rest now, imagine yourself upon a quiet beach. The sky is dark but gentle, the horizon soft with starlight. The tide rises and falls with a patient rhythm, neither hurried nor delayed. With each wave that comes, your breath rises. With each wave that drifts away, your breath falls. Slowly, gently, you find yourself breathing with the sea. The tide is cradling you, as it once cradled the first living beings on earth. It is rocking you in the same rhythm it has kept since the world was young. There is no need to hurry, no need to hold on to thought. The ocean has carried life safely for so long, and it will carry you now into stillness. Close your eyes and hear the lullaby of the sea, the song of moonlight and earth, of beginnings and continuings, of endless return. Let it guide you as softly as it has guided life for eons. For in the tides, there is no ending, only the quiet reassurance that all things move in rhythm, and that rhythm is peace. Sleep now with the ocean's eternal song.